Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the Automated Millionaire video/podcast. I'm Michael Pitzner and I am your host here. I am also known as the Automated Millionaire. I am the creator and the founder of the Automated Millionaire, its programs and its coaching. I help small and medium-sized businesses of all kinds of industry to make a better business with that business that they have. I do so without the business owners actually having to work harder. In fact, it actually becomes easier. It almost becomes a little bit on an autopilot because now all your team members will know what to do and you will know and have a system to keeping track that they're actually doing it. And you will make more money. And I'm doing all of this with the implementation of a unique business system that I call the Automated Millionaire Business System. This system has proven to work with all kinds of industries all over the United States, all over Canada, and the success rate has been said to be about 97-98% across about 300,000 businesses. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this system is not an industry-specific system. It doesn't need to be because the business of business is very universal and the business of business is business. Anyways, we are currently in a series, our second series of all these podcasts and so on, in which we are now looking at the mistakes business owners make. I'm highlighting mistakes because I know mistakes, they cost us a lot of money, sometimes extreme amounts of money, and sometimes we're aware of them and sometimes we're not aware of them, and very often we make these mistakes. And so I am hopeful that some of them you might get an awareness before you ever make them so you can avoid spending and wasting money on them. And then some of them maybe you're actually doing, but now you can get an awareness and say, okay, I need to not do that anymore. I need to fix that. I'm going to go with maybe some of the suggestions that Mikael, he brought me and made me aware of. In this current episode, we will be talking about a little bit about numbers again, because yesterday's episode we spoke about that a lot of business owners, they make the grave mistake of not using numbers. They don't go and pull their profit and loss statement and their balance sheet on a regular basis. And in this episode, we'll kind of continue on that basis yet a little bit further, because a lot of business owners, they don't value budgets. So what is a budget? Let's just be frank about what is about the budget first. So let's be clear about it so we're talking about the same thing and the same language, so to speak. For me, the budget is, well, how much I'm looking at a current year, how much is my revenues, how much is my sales going to be for the entire year? Let's say last year was $3.5 million. And this year I would like to say, well, I think we can actually do a $1 million extra. I think we need to have, for the entire of this year, we should reach $4.5 million. Well, by the same token, I'll go through all the other parts of that would make up my total year of profit and loss statement, which means I'll look at all the expenditures too and say, well, to reach that, how much extra would I have in, let's say, in my salaries and my wages, either in production or my sales or so on, how much extra in advertising. Does it cost me any more, rent maybe? No, probably not. Does it cost me an extra vehicle or two, depending on what kind of business I'm running? But I go through all of this and then I map out my budget. For me, a budget is not just the entire year, but I actually go back and I say, well, okay, let me map out what this budget looks like. Now, for this example, let's just talk about that your fiscal year, let's say it was a calendar year. So I would say, well, what does January look like? What does February look like? And I would do that with all of 12 months. And then I would have a tally at the end, which gives me the entire year. Now, the way I do this, it's like I usually look at least about 2 or 3 of the previous years. So I have a very good idea about what kind of baseline do I already have. If I'm doing a startup business, then, well, now it becomes very tricky because everything is made of assumptions and speculations and hopes and dreams and ideas about how much we're going to do about how much and how much funding we may have in place to carry out some activities that's going to cost us money and so on. So A startup is, I would say it's more difficult to get completely right, and maybe you'll actually have to make some revisions a few times in the year. For most other businesses up and running, you would be surprised how precise you can make the budget. Now, a few comments. When I use the previous 2 or 3 years as a base, it gives me a very good, solid foundational insight to how is my business performing. So now I have a very good idea about what the numbers should be. To that, I then add in, well, what am I going to do different this year? What am I going to do more of? I'm going to do more sales. What does that look like? Where is it more calls, more bidding, more quotes, more seeking out partnerships, finding more volume purchases or something. I kind of try to map out in my mind on pen and paper what that looks like so I can get an idea about, well, how much extra dollars does that mean that I would make? I then also have a fairly good, because of my history, I have a good idea about, well, what's the cost of producing that? Do I need an extra salary or two in there for extra salespeople? Do I need more production? So let's say if it was back in my day with the limousine services, well, I know that for pretty much every single dollar sold, I have some expenditure attached for a driver at least who needs to go in the car, right? I also know that I have some bookers in the office that needs to handle the booking, and I also know that I have somebody who needs to do the invoicing and so on. So I may have to go through the questions in my mind about, well, at what point do I need, to hire an extra booker to take care? Or are they capable of handling, 20% extra business, for instance, with the current setup? If they are, well, then now I don't have to add more expenditure for that particular case. But I might have certainly the extra driver expenditure. So all of these things, they go into the equation of mapping out how much is it. Now, when I do this right, I actually get a very, very clear picture of what that transition looks like, or what that evolution looks like. I told you that I look very much about, like, what are the improvements that is going to come in there. Oh, I know I just landed this big client, and I know that they have, a $200,000 extra volume a year. I might be getting, 70% of that and so on. So now I have that into the equation. I know I'm going to do these extra calls, and I expect to get $70,000 extra out of that, that exercise and so on. Likewise, I go in and say, okay, what's going to be bad about this year? Okay, well, we lost 2 clients. Maybe they tally up to, $50,000 worth of business. I need to take that out of the equation. I know we have more expenditure for, approval or inspection of cars or something. Let's say there's a new imposition of regulatory sense. I know that we'll do more trade shows, and that's going to have an effect on our expenditure. And maybe we say that we're not going to see much of the influx of business this year. Maybe it'll come delayed, so it'll be next year. So we'll have some expense this year without the attached extra income. And then now I kind of have to remember, well, for next year I need to have that in mind. But for now, I'm looking at what's this year's budget going to look like. That being said, typically speaking, I like to have this budget that I kind of make it at the last quarter of a current year, so that I'm looking at the next year. So I have that already when I enter that year. Wherever you are at, I would say, well, try to map it out for the rest of your current year. Then you have whatever your real results are for the month of your fiscal year up till date. And then you have the final parts in your budget, and then together it makes your forecast. We'll talk about forecast and how that's different from a budget and so on at a different time. But my point is that I really urge you to understand that these budgets can have a tremendous effect, because what it really does is it helps you say, well, you're not just going in a new year, starting a new year, let's say, And now you show up, you turn the key, open the doors, flick on the lights, sit by your computer, sit by your phone, wait for business to happen. No, you know that you're going to the year, you say, well, I'm going for that $1 million extra in my sales. Maybe even I'm ambitious, saying, I know I can take it up $3 million. Well, maybe that $3 million is substantial. If you're, let's say you're $3 million today, well, now you're doubling the business. So you want to go for $6 million. That's going to require something different today of you than you did last year, right? So now you have an end goal, you have a destination in mind, and I would venture to say when we have a destination in mind, it's much, much easier for us to actually reach that destination than when we don't have a destination. If we don't have a destination, we just come in and things just kind of like take its turn, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's a positive development, sometimes it's, a bit of a regression. When you have an end destination and you are driving your activities towards that destination, now you are in the driver's seat and you're making it happen. I want you to be that person. So budgets help do that. When you don't have a budget, you're just handling business, you're reacting to calls or whatever happens in your business, but you're not driving the business. Huge difference. And I want to really emphasize this, and this is why I made it in its own episode, is because a lot of businesses, they are like, well, how can you possibly predict next year? I had some of my farmers, they would say, well, look, I can budget all that, that's fine, but it won't mean anything because it's all up to the Lord and what he does with the weather. If he's going to give me a terrible season, I won't have the grain, I won't be able to sell as much, and it's not going to be that. And I would stop him and I say, well, look, dear client, I understand what you're saying. I kind of agree with you, but then I don't. And then I said, allow me 5 minutes to show you how this is not in fact true and how I can possibly predict with a large sense of accuracy what this year is going to be or what next year is going to be. And allow me those 5 minutes and then you will see that you can do it too. And so what I would do is I would, with the client's permission, I would draw out just the sales numbers, and I would take the sales numbers of every single month of, let's say, the last 5 years. And then I would map them out, and you could see that they would go like this, and then the next year would go almost very identical. Maybe over the course of years there might be a slight increase in where that line was, but pretty much the ups came at the same time, the dips came at the same time. So in other words, you can read seasonality, and you could, with very great degree of accuracy, you could predict where there was a dip, where there was a peak, which month, and by how much about, right? So in other words, once you see that, you mapped out the 5 years and they're so predictable now, they're so much the same. Could we say with certain degree of accuracy that we can probably map it out for this coming year too? I would venture to say yes. Could the weather be absolutely a total hailstorm and everything just falls and tumbles down? And so? Yes, it's been known to happen. But the likelihood is that we probably will predict our business with a large degree of accuracy. A side note to all of that is that typically when something detrimental happens to a business, we are thankfully so creative that we try to make up for it somehow else. So we kind of smooth out some of those things regardless. That's besides the point. But back to the case in hand. Budgets are super, super critical. They really help us get that result into reality that we want to achieve. So we can go and set that high aim target for where we want to get to within the current business year or next year. And it helps us drive, it helps us give a map of how we're going to get there. We may not know how we're going to get every single step, but a lot of it actually reveals itself when we come in and we say, well, we are now in our 3rd month, we need to get this sales, we're behind by X amount and so on. So we need to hustle, right? And so now you make some correction and we kind of get that. I usually also bring out the idea of the autopilot. So pretty much today, all aircrafts, modern aircrafts have an autopilot. Now the interesting part, because the autopilot helps you get up in the air and you set the autopilot to that, hey, we're taking off New York and we want to land in Paris. And it pretty much helps you, even if you should fall asleep as a pilot and sleep the entire way, it helps you bring the plane to Paris. Now here's the interesting part, and that's the point I want to bring you, is that as far as I've been told, the autopilot is actually off course for most of the time. And I suspect it's because you have turbulence, you have wind, you have gusts, you have air pockets and so on. So the plane keeps, getting in and out of course all the time. But what the autopilot does, it makes small corrections. So it reads, oh, I'm off course. If I continue, my destination would be far away from Paris, but I'm making a small course correction, and so now I'm in line with Paris. And then it goes a little bit further, and it's like, oh, now I overshot it, or I'm off course again. The wind took me off the course again, so it makes a new correction. So the autopilot kind of makes an auto correction all the time. And I would venture to say it's almost the same with the budget. When we have a budget and we follow it diligently, we look at everything, the profit and loss statement, and see, well, how well are we doing with the budget and so on. If we're behind, we kind of get our act up. We kind of say, well, we need to get more done in the same given time. We need to do something. Maybe we need to revise some pricing. Maybe we need to revise what we're doing, what we're selling, what we're focusing on, so on. Maybe it's on our expenditure. That, hey, what happened to our expenditure here seemed to go off the rocket. And then we find out, okay, well, we're really messing up certain way, right? But without the budget, we're just okay, this is our facts, and we're not questioning if this should be so. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this was helpful to you. I know for a fact that when I've set a budget, I pretty much always reach my goals, and very often I even will set an aggressive budget. That being said, I don't want to have too many revisions during the year. I would like you to stretch your imagination and stretch yourself into the performance that you're asking of yourself, and then you will see that you probably will be able to reach a higher goal than the one that you typically would have thought possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you the greatest bit of luck with that. I hope you will hit the like button, and I hope that you will subscribe to the channel. This is Michael Pitzner, also known as the Automated Millionaire. Thank you for your time, and I see you in the next episode.